Welcome to the NFL MVP Momentum Podcast. I'm Sam Holcroft alongside Peyton Thompson and Sean Rink. Before we begin, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Momentum MVP, follow our Facebook page at MVP Momentum Podcast, and check us out on YouTube at MVP Momentum Podcast. And don't forget to tune in to our Super Bowl live stream watch party on YouTube at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time this Sunday. So today we're going to be doing exactly kind of what we did last year, and that's going to be we voted for all of the 7 major awards, and we're going to kind of find out what the group thinks each award should be. So we'll start off with Coach of the Year. Now, this one was a really interesting one. You know, everyone was thinking like this was Dan Campbell's to lose going into the season because the Lions, if they won the division, it's his. But we had a lot of great stories. You know, the Ravens came out of nowhere, had the best record in the NFL. You had DeMeco Ryans, a rookie head coach with a rookie quarterback, make it, and Kevin Stefanski, along with losing his starting quarterback for a majority of the season, and then as starting running back week 2. You know, a lot of great stories. So who wants to go first in revealing who they had winning the award?
I'll start us off on this one. My coach of the year is DeMeco Ryans. I think what he was able to do with this kind of roster speaks volumes of the kind of coach he is and he's going to be in the future. You know, obviously having a rookie quarterback's a big part of it. And having, you know, I think we both agreed, Sam, that there was some really good low-key signings in the offseason. They've had a nice couple drafts, but the ability to make the playoffs, and, you know, obviously the playoffs aren't really going to function much into our selections here, but before, obviously, the playoffs, you know, they got that selection, or not selection, but they were able to make that playoff bid. So, yeah, I mean, being able to make the playoffs your first year with a rookie quarterback, and, you know, I would say in general, you know, obviously the Texans haven't been very good for the past few years. Obviously they were good with Deshaun, but that was a long time ago at this point. So, yeah, so just with what he was able to do, it was really impressive. But I want to talk about Dan Campbell just for a second here as well. I think that for him, obviously, almost making the playoffs last year and then making another big jump this year, just shows the kind of progress that he's putting into this team. And I also think that the Lions aren't super talented like, you know, some of the other teams that may be on this list as well. So yeah, what he was able to do with the team, obviously they had a really good playoff run, doesn't really factor into the award process, but you can kind of just see the kind of coach he is and how much of a leader he is for this team. So I think both these guys really deserve it. Wouldn't be surprised if Dan Campbell won it ultimately because they had a better record at the end of the season, I believe. But I think DeMeco Ryans coming in his first year with a rookie quarterback, not Jared Goff, who's a veteran quarterback at this point, really deserves to win it.
Well, I'll pick up from there. I agreed with you that DeMeco Ryans was our coach of the year, and it shows you how much I paid attention that I had no idea he was a rookie coach. I looked at it as, you know, the Texans, like you mentioned, haven't been good. We're able to take a rookie quarterback and have the season that they did. I think the only knock I guess I put towards Dan Campbell is I think he's a fantastic coach. I think the only knock is like you can kind of see that they were on the progress. Whereas like if he would have done this last year, I think you know for sure locked that there's no shot. I just think with what DeMeco Ryans was able to do down in Houston, and then even what Kevin Stefanski did in Cleveland with as little as he had after all the injuries, I think is the only reason that he comes down at 3. But I mean, like you said, if he ends up winning it, I think there's nobody that can argue that he's deserving of it or that it really comes off as much of a surprise.
Yeah, just to go with mine real fast, I agree. DeMeco Ryans is the guy that should have gotten it. But just to touch on the Dan Campbell, it's like, you know, if they would have beaten the Cowboys, they would have been the 2 seed with the same record as the 49ers. You know, so like they were the 3rd best team in the NFL if they would have just gotten that 2-point conversion against the Cowboys. And he still probably wouldn't have been able to win Coach of the Year just because, and it's no knock on him, but it's just D'Amico Ryan's rookie head coach with a rookie quarterback. Great story there. A bunch of rookies on that team, a lot of rookies and second-year players, both offense and defense. I think Kevin Stefanski, I mean, how many times do you go down to a fourth-string quarterback, second-string running back, and still make the playoffs? It's like it's just the off year where just Dan Campbell just, it was just the bad year that Dan Campbell could have had to try to win the award. And in terms of Zeke's, he did put Dan Campbell as winning, but he still got D'Amico Ryans at 2 and Stefanski at 3. We all kind of had John Harbaugh and Kyle Shanahan in the bottom, and we've kind of known this. Like, Coach of the Year normally doesn't go to a team that's the 1 seed. I mean, we talked about this early on in the season, PT, where you had, I think, Mike McDaniels winning it, and you also had them having the best record in the NFL. Sorry to bring that up, Sean, with how far they have fallen. But, it's you don't see that too often. I mean, Brian Dable was the 6th seed last year in the NFC, and he ended up winning it last year. So then for our final rankings, that put D'Amico Ryans winning, with Stefanski being 2nd, and then Dan Campbell right behind him at 3rd, John Harbaugh at 4th, and Kyle Shanahan at 5th. So now another one that, you wouldn't have thought was actually a conversation until about probably week 13, 14 of the season. Comeback player of the year. Going into the year, we were like, DeMar Hamlin plays, he gets it. And like, not discrediting, dying on the field, but a lot of these guys kind of had some good seasons. So starting off with showing the betting odds, they have DeMar Hamlin winning, but Joe Flacco, Baker Mayfield, Matthew Stafford, and Tua all up there. I'll go first with this one. So I have my comeback player of the year as DeMar Hamlin. Like, I mean, in the end of the day, he died and he came back to life. So that's why he's getting that. Although I love what Joe Flacco did, I don't even think during the regular season he had a bad game. He was written off. He was on the Jets last year, got benched again for, I think it was Mike White, and then also Zach Wilson late in the season. Baker Mayfield, everyone was like, is he even going to be a starter? I put him at 3rd. Matthew Stafford, I really liked what he did this year, kind of revitalizing his career, just proving to everyone, hey, I'm still here. But then I do have Tua in that bottom spot, even though, I think you guys might disagree with me a little bit.
I'm going to let PT go because I honestly don't even remember what I put for any of this.
So before I get into my pick, what week did DeMar Hamlin go down last season?
It was week 17.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second to last week.
Yeah. I feel like this is kind of deja vu because I feel like I might have. I think this is what it came from. It was the preseason awards when we talked about it. And I feel like what I said, and I still feel the same way, is that it's a great story for DeMar Hamlin. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he gets it. Obviously, he's the betting favorite. Took this selection for me more as just a football aspect of it. And for me, when Baker Mayfield has been, kind of bounced around the league ever since he left the Browns, obviously he was on the practice squad with the Panthers, and to come back in the same division on a roster that's pretty good, you know what I mean? But I don't think anyone saw him making the playoffs. I mean, obviously it's NFC South, right? So it's not too shocking. But at the same time, he was able to lead a team to the playoffs that he hasn't been able to do that in a few years. And he really looked like a good, competent quarterback, even sometimes a really good quarterback week to week. And I think the thing that surprised me the most about him is I thought that he would be a little bit more turnover prone, but he wasn't really that bad. I mean, obviously some games were worse than others, but some games he would have maybe 1 interception and he would have 250 pass yards with 3 touchdowns and win the game. So ultimately it was fine. And I think they split with everyone in the division, besides the Panthers. Obviously they swept them. But yeah, he just had a really incredible season for me. And then I put Tua as number 2 because I think a lot of people had injury concerns coming into the year with him, with his concussion stuff. And I think he played really well all season. Obviously, not the greatest end of the season, but I think he was, one of the guys that I was considering in the middle of the season. Obviously, I think I had him as I don't know if it was MVP. No, it wasn't MVP because I had Joe Burrow. Uh, I just, had a really good feeling he was going to be a really good player this year. And to kind of back up those thoughts of mine, and then kind of shake off the injury concerns of being too small or having head issues, that was, fine. So I have him at number 2. And then Joe Flacco, obviously, it makes a lot of sense for him to have the kind of run, take a team to the playoffs like he did. Being the age he is, really meant a lot to me. So yeah, I think that's my top 3.
You can go ahead and reveal mine because it's going to be a surprise to me because I forgot, even though it's literally yesterday that I did this. Oh, yeah, Joey Flacco. All right. Joseph DeFlacco, man. I picked Joey. I mean, like you said, the age that he is, came out of nowhere, performed the way that he did, just speaks volumes of what I think it is to be a comeback. He took the most of an opportunity that he was given when everybody wrote him off like, you might as well just retire. Like, you're not going to play, man. Like, you're old, move on. You had your time in the light. Came out, showed that he could play in an emergency situation, and realistically balled out and saved the Browns season. And going back to your point about DeMar Hamlin, I think you and I were on the same page. Like, yes, it's awesome that DeMar Hamlin's still alive. It's awesome that he was able to play some special team downs this year. But ultimately, I look at it as the award isn't just because he's alive. Like, I still want to see somebody that's actively playing, and it's not necessarily has to make an impact, but more than just some special teams. Like I said, it's great that he's back. I love that he's still alive. It's awesome, but I don't think it's fully encompassing of what the comeback player of the year is, because I'm a Dolphins fan, and I took Tua, and I only put him at 4. And if in theory, if we use kind of the same logic as DeMar Hamlin should win because he died, well then Tua should be a clear runner-up because dude almost died like 3 times on the field last year with his concussions. And I again, I'm not knocking DeMar Hamlin or anything like that. I just think that I'm looking past just that one aspect, and I want to see what they did on the field. And Joe Flacco was that clear winner for me. I think Baker made a very solid case. Kind of the same concept, He came in, the Browns originally wanted him to be the franchise guy. Didn't happen. Kind of been written off his career, and turned around things down there in Tampa. Led him to the playoffs, all that. Again, just it seems like it's more than just coming back.
Yeah, and we'll kind of see how the voters kind of take this because, like, obviously DeMar Hamlin is probably the best story that you could do. But like you said, PT, like, because you took in football account, like, how did they actually play? And I feel like that's a very interesting way to think about it. I mean, looking at the comeback player of the years, like the last 10 or so, I mean, there was Geno Smith last year, Joe Burrow. Geno Smith was, written off. He had a great season last year, deserving winner last year. Joe Burrow got injured. Alex Smith is a good story because he didn't really put up a lot of stats, but he came back from breaking his leg. So that's another good story one. I don't remember who else also was up in 2020 for that award. Everyone else was injured and then eventually came back and had a great season. And then even Eric Berry, who I think had cancer, took a year off, came back, but he still put up numbers deserving of that comeback player of the year award. So it was kind of both that story and the football aspect. So we'll see what the voters think. But in terms of us, see,
It's gonna be Joe Flacco probably.
And to bring up your point about Alex Smith, he also did play in 8 games that year.
That is true. Yeah, it's not like he just played in 2 games.
Right. He played in 8 games and he was 5-1 as starting quarterback. Like, he made a significant impact.
Right. We did have Joe Flacco winning 2 points ahead of DeMar, who was 1 point ahead of Baker, and then Tua was 4th, and Matthew Stafford was last. So now moving on to Defensive Rookie of the Year. A lot of these guys we were kind of probably expecting to be up here. Devin Witherspoon drafted at 5. Jalen Carter drafted at 9.
Mhm.
Will Anderson drafted at 3. Like a lot of guys that were drafted in that top 10. Then we also have a Kobe Turner and Joey Porter Jr. Joey Porter in the second round. I don't remember when Kobe was taken. I think he was taken maybe 3rd. But Sean, we'll let you go first on this one because I know that you have someone a little bit different than everyone else.
Well, I do. And I went with Devin Witherspoon. I should have brought up the stats because I can't remember entirely what you and I talked about yesterday. Let me pull them up real quick. I apologize. I'm not prepared for any of this stuff. I know that when we looked at it yesterday, I looked it up, and as a corner, he was a top drafted cornerback. The guy came out here at 53 or 56 solo tackles, 23 assisted. He had 3 sacks and a forced fumble. He also had that crazy 97-yard pick. When I looked at him compared to the other stats and to the other players, it's so hard because I didn't pay attention enough to see, how the D ends played or the D tackles and stuff of like the Will Andersons and the Jalen Carters and stuff like that to really compare. And you can't just go stats to stats when you're comparing those type of positions. But I just felt like Devin Witherspoon was almost an X factor, if you want to give him that X factor already, for the Legion of Boom defense there in Seattle.
Yeah, I would say, I definitely agree with you that he was a big impact for that team. But for me, I had to go with the 2 pass rushers at the top. And, I like a lot of what Will Anderson did this year. I think he had a little bit slower of a start than people were, expecting, but he looked really good. Obviously, he had a big impact on wins on the defense late in the season. I think he was well worth the, was it 3rd overall pick, I believe, or 2nd? Yeah, 3rd,
Will
3rd,
Will was 3rd. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So I think he was well worth it, and he's going to be a great player in this league for a long time. But when I think of a defensive player of the year or the defensive rookie of the year, I think of a game wrecker. And I think that's what Jalen Carter showed pretty much out of the box. And obviously, I think he kind of had a little bit slower of an end of the season. He didn't really, keep that momentum up. But when he had his good games, he was all over, I think I can't pull up his, I could, I guess, but I'm not going to. I know his sack numbers were pretty high. And I think the only one thing you could say that would kind of discredit his game this year is that obviously he came into a veteran unit, obviously corners or I guess DBs in general that were ready to give him that kind of time to get to the quarterback. But I feel like most people knew he was going to be pretty good coming out of Georgia, but obviously that car accident or whatever happened there in Georgia kind of made his stock fall a little bit because most people had him going top 6, top 5 when the before the story came out. He's shown that he's well worth a top 10 pick this year, well worth a top 10 pick, maybe top 5. So, yeah, he just made a big impact on games, and the numbers back it up as well.
Yeah, if you were to do a redraft of this entire draft, we can guarantee that Jalen Carter would not be drafted at 9. He, maybe gets drafted ahead of Will Anderson. But, a lot of things could have happened there. Zeke, obviously, he's going with his Eagles guy with Jalen Carter up top, but having the exact same thing that and reasoning that you had, P, I went slightly different route. I do kind of think that beginning slowness kind of was a huge deal for me with the Will Anderson. He wasn't really producing as much as I was kind of expecting him to, being drafted at 3rd. Jalen Carter being that wrecker, like you said. But I put Devin Witherspoon at 2nd just because I feel like he was thrown to the wolves right away. They had, I think, 3 out of their 4 guys starting this year, or I guess 2 of their secondary guys it was their second year in the league, and then he was a rookie. So they were going to be picked apart, and yet they ended up being, if I remember correctly, I think it was a top 12 pass defense in the league in terms of, I think, completion percentage and passing yards allowed. And I feel like Devin Witherspoon, a lot of us were kind of like, I think PT, you and I were expecting Christian Gonzalez to be the first corner drafted. And when Devin Witherspoon went 5 to Seattle, we went,
5.
whoa.
Yeah.
And because Christian fell down to 17. So you're telling me that he is 12 picks higher than any other corner? And he definitely played like it this year.
Yeah, yeah. And to add to that, he was the who was number 4?
4 was Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, so he was not only was he the first corner to go by a mile, but I think you might be forgetting about Emmanuel Forbes. I think he might have went earlier than Gonzalez. But
Forbes went. Oh yeah, Forbes went 16. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but either way, he was the first corner to go by a mile. But not only that, but he was the second defensive player off the board in front of a guy like Jalen Carter. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely worth the pick. I kind of always liked his game coming out of Illinois. He's a very physical corner, and he uses that to his advantage in the NFL. And I think he's going to be a good corner for a long time.
Yep. So then bringing those voting standings, we got Jalen Carr winning. It was almost unanimous with 24 points. Devin Witherspoon was second with 17. Will Anderson, 14. Kobe Turner, who we really didn't talk about, but still had a great season for the Rams this year at 13. And then Joey Porter was in last with 5. So Rookie of the Year, I think this is a pretty obvious one. I'll reveal the betting odds real fast, but PT, I'll let you go ahead and go with this one because I know that you are now a Texans fan, right?
I can't go that far, and I've told you this off air a couple of times, and obviously my two teams are the Falcons and the Houston Rockets, but I love what CJ Stroud and Tyrese Halliburton are doing right now. Two young guys, but anyways, I'm going to focus on CJ Stroud. He came in as a rookie, was able to lead his team with a rookie head coach who we just got done talking about to the playoffs with other rookies on that offense. Didn't really have a great number one option. I mean, what can you imagine if this guy would have had a guy like Mike Evans or Calvin Ridley? Can you imagine that? Or even like a younger guy like a Drake London or a Garrett Wilson. I just think he was able to do so much with so little. And honestly, like Puka Nacua had a really good year too. He was my second guy, and obviously he would win it in most years, especially as a wide receiver. But just what CJ Stroud was able to do in his first year, and be confident all year. His body language, was a lot for the team to kind of rise up to. His leadership, he has all the intangibles you want in a rookie quarterback. So, and it's crazy because before the season started, I think if I would have told you as a prediction, CJ Stroud is going to be the offensive rookie of the year, and it's not even going to be close, and Bryce Young isn't going to be anywhere close to that top 5, you would have
been
not
crazy.
believed me. Exactly.
I would have said you're crazy.
Yeah, you would have said like, did Bryce Young get hurt, or what happened here? But yeah, he's really showed up to play, and he's only going to get better as they get more weapons and he gets smarter, and D'Amico Ryans gets more experience. I can't wait for it.
And I agreed here that CJ Stroud was the offensive rookie of the year. I do think that Puka would have won it if he continued doing the same performances that he had before Cooper Kupp came back. I think Cooper Kupp limited his ability to be that guy. He's still that guy, but now you had 2 of those guys, if that makes any sense. I think if Nacua would have just been, the last half of the season or whatever, the last 4 or 5 games when Cooper Kupp was back and was playing full time, really impacted, because we're talking about a guy who was drafted 5th round, 177th overall last year, that's in the running for offensive rookie of the year. I think if he would have been able to maintain just slightly higher, not anything crazy, but I do think that the Cooper Kupp honestly hurt his chances to win this simply because of that. And CJ Stroud had a great season. I 100% think he's the best quarterback or the rookie quarterback last year or this year, however you want to look at it, and deserving of the rookie of the year. But I want to focus on Puka Nacua because he had such an amazing season. And like you said, CJ Stroud is the only person in the performance that he did that would have come anywhere close to taking over. Like from Puka Nacua to Sam Laporta or Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan Robinson, it's like a significant difference.
Yeah.
Like if we want to talk about a ladder or stepping stones, CJ Stroud's 10, Puka Nacua is 9.5, and then Sam Laporta or Jahmyr Gibbs is like 6.5, 7. Like there's a
Yeah.
few steps in between there, between those performances, and it's just sad for a guy like Puka Nacua that 5th round. I mean, who knew who Puka Nacua was before this? The first 3 games of his season, I don't even remember what it was, but had how many receiving yards this year to start the
I think
season? I'm trying to
I
pull
think
it
he
up.
led the league for those first 3 or 4 weeks of the season.
So his first game, 10 receptions, 119. Second game, 15 receptions, 147. And 4th game in, he has 9 receptions, 163 yards. Dude's at like 500 yards 4 weeks into the season. Maybe my math sucks, but like it just sucks that, middle of the season when he had a little lull when Cooper Kupp came back hurt him the way it did.
Probably the biggest fantasy steal of the year, I would say.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how many in what percentage of leagues was he even drafted?
I was gonna say,
because was he even technically wide receiver 1? I mean, he's a 5th round draft pick. They still had Tutu Atwell, and who else did they have?
They had a couple older guys.
You probably would have picked Tyler Higbee as a flex over Puka anyways. But then after that first week, snatched up easily.
Yeah, most people probably would have taken what's his name who got traded to the Falcons? I can't remember his name right now. Speed guy.
Oh yes, he played there. Van Jefferson.
Yeah, Van Jefferson. Yeah, they had Van Jefferson as well. So yeah, really impressive rookie season from him for sure. And at least he made the Pro Bowl. It's not like the year was for nothing. He made the Pro Bowl as a rookie, and not a lot of guys do that. So.
Yeah. And the only sad thing, like obviously CJ and Puka would have had great seasons, but the only sad thing is like Bijan getting here just because he's a great talent. If the Falcons and this personally, PT, but if the Falcons just would have utilized him more and better, he could have easily been climbing to that 3rd or 4th. But with the season that both they had, he would have had to carry this team to the playoffs in order to even stand a chance. But he still had a great season nonetheless with that bad coaching staff.
And I want to ask one question to both of you here real quick. I apologize if I interrupted you on Bijan.
No, you're good.
I wanted to look at it because I'm the only one that went different. When you look at this category, are you looking so I'm just going to be outright honest here. Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs, both on the same team. How do you rate? Are you rating on their impact for the team, or are you just looking at individual performances? Because Sam and I talked about this yesterday, and I had a slightly different view, which is why I flipped these two. But I'm the only one that went different, so I wanted to talk about it.
I would say for me, and it's the same thing with the NBA of the Rookie of the Year award. It's not so much one thing or the other, but it's like a culmination of things. So like the way that I view it is it's like, do you check these boxes? So obviously like as you watch the games, who do you see passes the eye test of impacting wins more? I think it was probably Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't know if you guys would agree with me, but I would say he impacted the game a little bit more. I mean it's hard to say because he also didn't get as many touches in the first half of the season. But then Sam Laporta also had a really good consistent season, also had a really good end of the season. And without him, I'm not sure who would have taken his spot because if they don't have Jahmyr Gibbs, at least they have what's his name? The other
David
running
Montgomery.
back. Yeah, they still have David Montgomery. So it's like, I feel like they needed Sam Laporta a little bit more. But anyways, it's more so a culmination of things. But I think another thing that I factor in, and it's not like it's the end all be all, but it's how much are you winning compared to the other guys, right? And with that, you have to factor in a lot of other stuff. How good is your team? How good is your head coach? All that kind of stuff. But if you're winning just as much as the next guy, but you have better stats, then you're going to get the nod. Or if you have a worse team, but you're doing just as good as the other guy, and maybe he has 2 more wins, but you have a much worse team, then you might get the nod. You kind of have to compare that way.
No, that makes sense. I was just trying to compare since they were on the same team, and they like. How often do you have 2 guys on the same team that you're sitting here like both these guys are up for top 5 of Rookie of the Year? And both of them made a very significant impact. I was just curious on your guys' opinion on how you judge 2 guys on the same team but at different positions the way they are.
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of piggyback off of what PT said a little bit, but you also got to keep in mind that Jahmyr Gibbs, everyone was furious with that pick at 6 over Bijan Robinson. You were crazy
No,
for that, or no, you're right. You're right. They traded down. They traded down to 12.
yeah,
But still, like
yeah,
being the second running back off the board at 12 when you already just went out, or I guess they didn't get David Montgomery, but they still had Swift and Jamal Williams that could have re-signed. But considering that he was behind David Montgomery, he was the number 2. Sam Laporta was the day 1 starter.
yeah,
And just looking at David Montgomery's numbers, he had 2 100-yard games, and before he got injured, so the first 5 games of the season, he averaged, or he had 3 games that he had 19 or more carries, and he had 2 100-yard games. He didn't have a single game over 18 carries once Gibbs started getting more touches and after the injury. And Montgomery also only had 100-yard game after that. So it was clear that they were starting to share the touches. But if Jahmyr was the week 1 starter, maybe they don't win against the Chiefs because he did kind of have a few rough first games, and even when he was the number 1. But he finally started picking it up once that mid-October, late October started coming around. And I just kind of liked the fact that he kind of climbed out of that number 2 spot because, like, honestly, there was no starter and backup when it came to that running back position. So that's why I liked Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit over Sam Laporta, but it was close.
Fair enough.
yeah, for sure.
So then we already know who won because it's our first unanimous, but we had CJ Stroud 25 points, Puka 20, Jahmyr Gibbs at 14, Sam Laporta 11, and then Bijan down at 5. So enough with the rookies. Now let's talk about the big boys. We're going to talk Defensive Player of the Year. I'll show the odds first. You get the great powerhouses like the Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Micah Parsons, and Max Crosby. And then we also have Darren Bland, who had 9 interceptions this year, led the league, and also having 5 pick sixes, which I think tied a season record. So I'll go first with this one. I know what you guys are expecting. You guys are expecting Max to be number 1, but I gotta be somewhat realistic. But I said this at the beginning of the season. This is TJ Watt's award to lose. TJ Watt wins the award if he didn't get injured last year. He puts up some great stats. You have to double this guy or run the exact opposite way, and he still might make a play. If you got a quarterback that can scramble, you better know where TJ is. Otherwise, if you don't, he's probably right next to you. Myles Garrett had a great season too. A huge reason why the Browns made the playoffs this year and had the success. I still like my guy, Max Crosby, getting doubled every other play. Just such a big guy that if he gets off of one block, he can still make a play on the other side of the ball. But then I do have the 2 Cowboys players down at picks or spots number 4 and 5. That's great defense, but I feel like there is 6 guys that are like worthy of like getting recognition rather than these 2 guys being leaps and bounds, because let's be honest, nobody was coming close to being as efficient and effective as TJ Watt on the Steelers. And even though the Browns defense was really good, no one's touching Myles Garrett and nobody's touching Max Crosby.
Yeah. I'm gonna keep this kind of short because I don't really have much more to add. I think you hit the nail on the head that, like, comparatively to other awards, and I think you could say the same thing about, offensive and MVP as well with this one. But it's not like there's a big drop off anywhere. All these guys are really good players. For me though, and I agree with you, TJ Watt is the defensive player of the year, but for me, when I look at impact, it's hard to see other guys that make as much of an impact as Max Crosby, but I get it. You know, he didn't get the wins. Obviously, the offense was miles behind, especially later in the season. I mean, the defense was playing as well as we've seen the Raiders defense play in the last couple years. So, and he was, he was the head guy of that defense. So, and he's really consistent. Um, so, yeah, I mean, I really wish Max would have been, or I wish he would have had a better offense to pair, and hopefully that comes soon enough. But yeah, I just think on a talent standpoint, what he was able to do keeps him at number 2, and then my list falls pretty much the same.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what Zeke is, but I can't imagine that we're gonna get too far off of our second in a row unanimous decision here. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think TJ Watt just was miles ahead, and I didn't mean to do a play on words because you
Yeah.
just released Myles Garrett. But I mean, TJ Watt, your 2021 Defensive Player of the Year. When we compare stats of this year to his 2021 season, granted he had 2 less games, but had more tackles, had 19 sacks this year compared to 22 and a half, 4 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, a pick. And that's not even including just how disruptive he was on that defensive line. If you take that guy off of that team, that defensive line sees probably the biggest decrease in skill that you're going to see on any team. Like there's just not the guy to follow up that. Not a knock again to Myles Garrett. If you want me to be honest, if there's a Sportsmanship of the Year award, Myles Garrett should get it for not using another helmet against the Steelers. But I gotta give it back to TJ Watt. Give him a second Defensive Player of the Year, and let's get on out of here.
Yeah. And then just revealing our picks here, TJ Watt snuck by with 22 points. Myles Garrett getting second with 21. Max Crosby at 12. Micah Parsons at 11. And then Darren Bland at 9. Even though it's an incredible feat, like I said, just too many guys on that Cowboys defense that deserves like some sort of recognition. But great job of stepping up when Trayvon Diggs went down, though. Like that's a huge reason why he's here. Now going on to Offensive Player of the Year, this is truly like the offensive MVP because we all know MVP goes to quarterback on the best team in the league. But we got great guys. We like Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, those position players that deserve their recognition. And then we also have Lamar and Dak, who are both also up for MVP. But since we got one of your guys here, Sean, we'll let you go first. Did you go Tyreek 1?
Oh, I sure did. Sure did there, Samuel. Tyreek Hill, number 1, all right? He's number 10 on the field, but he's number 1 in our hearts, and he's number 1 in the Offensive Player of the Year voting here, all right? So when I look at it, I'm not going to be biased here. I'm just going to take a step back. If you look at what Tyreek did down there, he was on pace until he got injured late against the Titans. He got injured late. Honestly, it crippled him for the next couple of games. As much as it wasn't that significant of an injury, they were still making a playoff push. They had to make sure they maintained it. But Tyreek Hill was on pace for the first 2,000-yard receiving season in NFL history. Tyreek Hill was in the conversations for MVP. Granted, I get Christian McCaffrey, Lamar Jackson, all of them, like Lamar, Christian, and Dak are on the MVP voting. But Tyreek Hill, I don't think there's a player on any team on the offensive side that made a bigger impact for their team than Tyreek Hill did. You take Tyreek Hill that out of that Dolphins offense, just the same as you do with, TJ Watt. That offense does not run as smoothly. And I still to this day still think that, as a Dolphins fan, I'd rather have Justin Herbert, but Tyreek Hill literally just runs and he's there. Like he is the absolute biggest difference maker in the league when it comes to the offensive side of the football. And I think the biggest knock that I have for CMC is just there's 9 Pro Bowlers on that team. Like there's so many weapons that his efforts get overshadowed. They're great, but I think when I'm looking at Offensive Player of the Year, I'm going to the guy that makes the biggest impacts for his team.
See, I wanted to. You almost swayed me until you said makes the biggest difference for his team. And if we're going to be talking about that, then we got to talk about the one and
Bring in
only
Brock
Christian
Purdy?
McCaffrey.
Oh,
No, stop. We'll get there. So Christian McCaffrey, you take him away from this awesome offense that the 49ers have, and they might just be a good offense. You could say that they're probably one of the greatest ones, hence why people think mediocre Brock Purdy is up for MVP. But I mean, you take Christian McCaffrey away from this offense, and they go from great to good. You take away Tyreek Hill from this really good offense, they're still fairly good with the scheme and everything that they have. I mean, they had how many guys have almost like I think they had the record for number of guys that had 750 total yards. I think in a season on a team, because I know both running backs had 750. I think Jalen had 750. Tyreek. I think they even had a third wide receiver, and I think even Smythe had close to that, if I remember correctly. You can check me on that, but I mean, it's not to discredit Tyreek Hill, but I just think that this is Christian McCaffrey's award, and CeeDee Lamb definitely deserves to be here. But it's just I think that these two guys were just a little bit better on their respective teams.
so not to take away from PT here real quick, but what you just said, you say if you take Tyreek out, you're not taking a great offense and making him good. Well, there was multiple games this year that Tyreek wasn't there, and that offense became basically pointless. Like they weren't there anymore without Tyreek. So I'm not gonna dive into it, but from how I viewed it, you take CMC out, I don't think they make a big of a drop as Tyreek does in Miami. Could be a little biased, but I did see more Dolphins games than Niners games.
No, that is fair though.
Yeah, I think if I could have one award that they just have a tie and they both get the award, it'd be this one. I think you can put either guy up there, but I took the running back here. I feel like my reasoning for this, and like I said, I mean, either way, you can't go wrong. But for me, I think that with a running back, it's a lot more of him doing a lot of the work versus Tyreek Hill having to have another guy on the other side. Jalen Waddle get a lot of the looks, having Smythe get a lot of the looks. The running backs in the backfield, both of them had a really good season. Tua obviously has to be pretty good. And you might ask, well, shouldn't that be the reason why he gets it? Because, all these things have to happen. But I feel like when they all do happen, it just helps him a little bit more. Whereas I think with C-Mac, obviously he's getting a lot of balls in the air, but they're not a whole lot of deep slings. I mean, he's not really beating guys, but he's more so with the ball in his hands, making the most out of his opportunities. So I guess it's a little bit different of kind of play style and philosophy. But either way, I mean, I think it's a good choice. But I took Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah. So then our final voting for this one, we have Christian McCaffrey with 23 points, Tyreek Hill at 22, CeeDee Lamb at 14, Lamar at 11, and then Dak Prescott at 5.
So
So
I
then
gotta
that
ask because it hasn't been described, and maybe I'm wrong. How does voting points count? How are they
uh,
calculated?
I'm pretty sure they're so how we're doing it here with ours. If they are first, they get 5 points. Second gets 4. Third gets 3. Fourth gets 2, and then fifth gets
5 gets
1.
1. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that that's exactly how the voters do it too, except you can pick anyone. So if you wanted to pick, I don't know.
So, but going off of that logic, how is there not a tie on this one?
because that's 5, 10,
Should be a tie.
15, 19, 23. It should not be.
So you're taking the betting odds and including that into your scoring system.
Yeah.
Seems
to
weird, but I
provide
get it.
more.
I
Yeah,
get it
just
because
to provide one more.
then it's an odd and then it can't be a tie.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay,
That
I was
makes
just trying to
sense.
figure out because like none of these added up. I'm like, seems like it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but like we're getting up to 24 points. It doesn't make any sense, but now it makes sense. I just wanted
Yeah.
to clarify.
Yep. So then that brings us down to MVP. So I think we all kind of know how this is going to go, but we can kind of just do some justifications. Betting odds has Christian McCaffrey down at 5 under Josh Allen, Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, and then they have Lamar Jackson winning. Who would like to take the first stab at this?
I'll take this one. So in my opinion, Josh Allen shouldn't even be mentioned in the betting odds, in my opinion. I know they had a pretty good end of the season, but they were just so inconsistent throughout the season that I personally can't put him up there in my top 5. I'd rather put Patrick Mahomes up there because he had a lot less to work with throughout the season. And I think he's just a more consistent, better player than Josh Allen. And obviously Dak Prescott had a really good season, probably his best season of his season or of his career. But ultimately, I think it's going to be Lamar Jackson. He had the stats to go with, his best. I don't know. Would you say it's his best season? Because he had the other MVP season, so it's hard really to say. But ultimately, they were the best team in the NFL. He had the stats to go with it, so it's hard not to give it to him. And obviously, he's the quarterback of the team. That's usually how it goes. Best team with the stats usually gets the MVP.
Go ahead, Sam.
Okay.
I'm pulling something up first.
All right, I was too, but I'll
Oh.
I'll go with Zeke's first. How about that?
Wait,
Let's
hold
see,
on,
let's
hold on.
see.
Let me mention one more thing at the end. One more thing. I am not a big fan of Brock Purdy. I gotta touch on this real quick, but I
Hey.
can't deny the consistency, the production, being on one of the best teams in the NFL. But I'm just I'm not a big fan of having him, up there as an MVP caliber type of player. But he meets the criteria.
All right,
Game
was that enough time
manager
for you, Sean?
or playmaker? Brock Purdy.
Mixed.
All right, fair enough. We'll move on.
50-50.
So I'll pick up where PT kind of left off. Lamar is my my MVP. I have Brock Purdy right behind. Honestly, I do see your point about Josh Allen not being on this list. I think the only reason that I put Josh as high as I did was simply because the last half of the season, he isn't the only reason that they got in there. They had a couple games where they literally ran the ball and he threw the ball like 10 times and didn't do anything. But I still think that he is one of the biggest playmakers when it comes to the offensive position. And as we all know, quarterback just runs, all these MVP awards, whether it's NFL MVP, college football Heisman, it's a quarterback driven thing. If you want my opinion about the 5 that are on there, if there's one that I would drop, I'd probably drop Dak, but I'm not going to get into that. But I am going to pull up Lamar's stats from 2019 versus this season. And this might be what Sam's trying to do as well. But I think this year for his MVP is actually more impressive than his 2019. I think his 2019, yes, it was his second year in the league, but I think there's something to be said about a guy who is able to do what he did in his sixth year compared to what you do in your second year. You can see it all the time with rookies or guys who come in early. As Nebraska fans, I know PT doesn't care as much, but like you look at like Adrian Martinez when he was here. His first year, great. We thought he's it. Heisman front runner, all this stuff. Guys when they're early on don't have as much film. It's easier to make an impact. And I'm not taking anything away from his 2019. But he was able to battle through, all the adversity of not being a quarterback and all that, and he proved that he's a quarterback this year. He had 500 more passing yards this season than he did in the 2019. So he proved that he can actually throw the football. He threw, what was it? I guess he didn't throw as many touchdowns, but he was able to run and pass. Whereas I feel like in 2019 it was more run first, pass second. And this year he proved, hey, I can be the quarterback and I can make plays with my feet when needed.
And I'll add one more thing to that as well. Not only did he mix up his game more, but he stayed healthy. And there was a lot of doubt on if he was going to be able to do that. Obviously, not having a really full season for the last few seasons. But this year he was able to stay healthy, and it really paid dividends for the Ravens because they were able to have, the number one seed, and they were able to be a great team and even rest their guys in the last week of the season, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but that was the only game he missed, right?
Yep, it was.
Yeah, and so it wasn't even due to a real injury. So he really could have played every single game this season, but it just showed that the contract was worth it for the Ravens, and you paid him back with a decent run. Obviously not where they wanted to go, but it showed that he can stay healthy, basically.
All right. So
You're going up against a lot here, Sam.
I'm going up against a lot, and I'll back it up.
Yeah.
All right. I have Lamar third.
Wow.
So, okay, let's get rid of the elephants. Josh Allen, like PT said, shouldn't even be on the list. He was a finalist, so that's the only reason I put him on here. Otherwise, I would have put up literally any other person, literally any other quarterback, potentially over
Not
Josh
Desmond Ridder,
Allen.
though.
You get, did Desmond Ridder turn the ball over 20 times? No, probably just 18. But I just, but you can't lead the league in turnovers year after year and be up for MVP. You just can't. I just don't understand. Like, here's the thing. It's like either you get Josh Allen, who has 300 total yards, 1 touchdown, 3 turnovers, or you get Josh Allen, who has 375 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. It's like there's no balance. There's no mediocre or decent game for Josh Allen. It was either great or it was bad. Dak Prescott, like you said, PT, probably best season he's had in his career. When a lot of people were doubting him, saying like, okay, Zeke's gone, so like we're time to find out if Dak's the problem. And it turns out Dak's not the problem. Not saying that Zeke was, but a good season. But I just think that there is a step above with these top 3 than those bottom 2. Before I go into Lamar, because that's the hot topic, I am going Christian McCaffrey 1, just because I was talking about value. And, we have 2 teammates on here, which is like, we've been seeing a lot of that with a lot of these awards. The offensive rookies, we've had 2 teammates. The defensive player of the year, we've had 2 teammates. Offensive player of the year, 2 teammates. And we have it for MVP here. But I would say the only reason I have Christian McCaffrey over Brock Purdy, because I wanted to put Brock Purdy 1, but Christian McCaffrey makes Brock Purdy look better. And that's more valuable. You take Brock Purdy out, Christian McCaffrey does drop a little bit, but not as much as if you take McCaffrey out, because he's been the safe haven and he's been healthy. When was the last time that he played 15 games in a season? I think other than last year, I don't think he really has. So I have Christian up top. Brock Purdy has led in but in a lot of statistical categories, like completion or yards per completion, yards per attempt. He had, I know we don't take into effect playoffs, but he had 2 game-winning drives and 1 fourth quarter comeback in the playoffs this year. I mean, he's not just a game manager. He is indeed a playmaker. But now we got to just talk about Lamar.
Talk about the playmaker.
Okay, whatever. So here's the thing. In the last 10 years, there has been 1 MVP that had not thrown for at least 4,000 yards. There's been 2. That was Cam Newton on a 15-1 team, where if he would have played week 17 of that, because I think he sat, he would have ended up getting 4,000 yards. Aaron Rodgers had 2 seasons of getting 4,000 yards, almost like right at the cusp. But the only other time was Lamar Jackson, where he threw for 3,300. This year he threw for 36 with one extra, or sorry, 30, he threw 31 or 32 in 2019, and he threw for 36 this year. So his yards per game went up slightly, less touchdowns, one more interception. So I don't understand why we think that this is a better season for him necessarily, but at the end of the day, the MVP by default goes to the quarterback of the best team in the league, which is how it shouldn't be, but it is. Because, we've had, what was it, 2 years ago? Should have been Cooper Kupp. But it was Aaron Rodgers because he was the quarterback on the best team in the league, record-wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you spelled it out. But so, and we've talked about this with the All-Star NBA stuff. Are we going based off of who we think, or who we think should win it, or who we think is going to win it? Because
This is
I
what
went
we
at
think.
this as a prediction.
Gotcha. Well, this was what we were kind of feeling rather than thinking to an extent. But, most of the time they go hand in hand, too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, I would have had C-Mac probably above Brock if I didn't have him as my offensive player of the year as well. But that's neither here nor there.
Fair. Right. So then just bringing out the final rankings, we got Lamar winning with 23 points, Brock Purdy 18, Christian McCaffrey with 15, Dak at 9, and Josh Allen at 7. So now my only question for you guys is there's 7 awards. How many did we get right? Because we have 1, 2. We have 2 that are within 1 point, and then 1 that's within 2 points. So we got D'Amico Ryans winning Coach of the Year, Joe Flacco comeback player, Jalen Carter rookie, almost a gimme. C.J. Stroud probably is the gimme.
Yeah.
T.J. Watt, Christian McCaffrey, and then Lamar Jackson.
I can tell you right now we got more right than we got wrong. That I can guarantee you. The only ones that I'm a little iffy about are the comeback player of the year, because I think Hamlin could win it. And then comeback player of the year, I'm not sold that Joe Flacco is going to get it. I think he has a good chance, but or I guess that's the same award either way with DeMar as well. So I mean, either way, I think we could be wrong on that one. I also think that Tyreek has a pretty good chance to win Offensive Player of the Year. With the kind of season he had, that was the other one where I'm like, feel like a tie is pretty warranted on that one. But I feel like the rest are pretty valid. I mean, I think Lamar has a pretty good chance to win MVP. I think Offensive Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year are pretty much locks, unless they just love the Lions story so much that they want to give it to him. But I feel like that would be such a disservice to D'Amico Ryans and kind of the what he had to build in 1 year. And then I would say defensive player of the year is a little bit iffy, but I have a pretty good feeling TJ Watt is going to take that one as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same boat. I think I think PT and I are on the same page where like DeMar's, yeah, great, give it to him if you want, but not necessarily how we view the award. But I think as far as the NFL, I think the voters and stuff they're probably gonna put DeMar in that. I think that's probably what's gonna happen. And then honestly, the only other one that I really see that could flip flop is maybe TJ Watt and Myles Garrett for Defensive Player of the Year. And I'll argue it off stream or off podcast. I think Tyreek could win it, but I think the fact that Christian maybe stayed the whole season maybe is why he gets it over him. But I think those are the only two is the Defense Player of the Year and Comeback Player of the Year.
All right. So is there anything else you guys need to add?
No.
No.
Nah.
All I'm saying is, like, this is the second time in the last 10 years that we're going to have a running back win the MVP.
I remember.
I said what I said.
I think this is going to be the third time in NFL history that a MVP has less than 4,000 yards passing in a season.
It's just gonna be a new trend. But I remember in the middle of the season, Sam, maybe like week 5 or 6, not quite the middle, a little bit before that. Maybe it was closer to the middle, like 7 or 8. And you probably remember. And I came over to watch the games, and I told you I was watching Fox pregame, whatever, before I came over, and I was saying to you, I'm like, are you surprised? Or I guess I didn't say it wasn't a question, but I'm like, did you know they were talking about Lamar Jackson winning MVP this season? And all you had to say is you rolled your eyes and you said, "There's no way," and we're here.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't expecting the Ravens, to one beat out the Bengals in that division. All it took was Joe Burrow getting hurt, and I will
Yeah.
stand on that hill. And then also just like the other good teams in the
The AFC fell apart, man.
just fell apart. They were the only team, and here's the thing: they have 3 really bad losses.
Yeah.
The Steelers, Colts, Browns. Browns
Yeah.
with their third string quarterback, might I add. And they also had a 20-point lead in that game, I believe. And they just fell apart. Chiefs, fell apart worse. The Dolphins fell apart worse. I guess they didn't fall apart. They just couldn't beat the good teams.
Yeah.
Chargers, gone. Jaguars literally fell out of the playoffs.
Yeah, the Jets choked it. Jaguars, sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just it just ended up being there. So,
Yeah.
And the award goes to quarterback on the best team in the league. And to be frank, if Brock Purdy didn't throw 4 interceptions that game, if he throws maybe 2, maybe the Niners win that game. And then maybe this is Brock Purdy's award to lose because they would have had the same record. But head to head, world may never know. But once again, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Momentum MVP. Follow our Facebook page at MVP Momentum Podcast. Check us out on YouTube at MVP Momentum Podcast. And once again, don't forget to tune in to our Super Bowl live stream this Sunday, February 11th on YouTube at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. I've been Sam Holcroft.
I've been Peyton Thompson.
Sean Rink.
Thanks for listening.